Now, we've had a number of claims over the horrific last couple of years since October the 7th, where, Hamas have claimed that Israeli forces have struck a hospital, destroyed the whole hospital, killed 200 people, 500 people, I think, at one point. Turned out to be completely untrue. It was a weapon fired at the very beginning of the war, a weapon fired from within Gaza, and actually it was a very small number of people who had died. We've also had a number of journalists who have died, many of whom, it has been quite categorically proven, have ridiculously close links with Hamas, so members of Hamas or other jihadi organisations, some of whom were in Israel on October the 7th celebrating those horrific attacks. However, in this case, we're talking about a strike on a hospital which the IDF has admitted was them, a double strike, not just journalists, but 15 other people also killed. How does a mistake like this happen? I mean, the IDF is known for its precision, and they know where the hospitals are. So what on earth could have happened?
We don't know, Julia. Again, if it was a terrible mistake, then the IDF will do its investigations. And Israel, whenever it has made a mistake, it has shown regret. It has changed the way that things are done or chain of command. This has happened before. We are we're fighting a war in a very, very difficult terrain because it's urban warfare. What does it mean? And I think Tom said it better than me. Essentially, you got the Hamas terrorists who don't even wear uniforms. That's the first law of war. It's the first war crime in this situation. They don't wear uniforms. They're pretending to be civilians. B, they have tunnels under hospitals, or like somebody else said once, they don't build hospitals, they don't build tunnels under hospitals, they build hospitals over tunnels. They've got an incredible amount of hospitals, more than in Israel, because that is the decoy for the actual tunnel opening, which is where they keep their terrorism infrastructure. And of course, like you mentioned, you've got these journalists, some of them are working for Hamas, some of them are sympathetic to Hamas, and some of them are just scared of Hamas. So there's very little objective journalism there. But again, if there are innocent people there, and it looks at the moment that there were, then unfortunately, these are the horrible, tragic casualties of war. In everything that we've been through in the last 2 years, when you look at the numbers, even when you take Hamas numbers of 60,000, Israel believes that 30,000 of those are terrorist combatants. And so this type of, you can't talk about people's lives in this way, but this type of casualty, innocent casualty to combatant rate is better than any other war in the last 100 years.
I mean, that's the thing. I liken this often, where we're in COVID. Suddenly people were being told death rates every day. People didn't think that people had died before then. People would be astonished to discover what the civilian to combatant death rate was in pretty much any war that Britain or any of our Western allies have fought in recent and further back years. 1.5 to 1.3, depending on the figures you can see. And the reality is, we don't really know. There's even the Iraq war all these years on. We don't know how many people died entirely, because in a war you don't. And yet somehow Gaza authorities, i.e. Hamas, put out a figure, within hours, telling us exactly how many people have died and who they were and civilians. Never happened in wartime before. Suggests that perhaps this isn't actually the case. Here's the thing, though. I mean, we don't know about these journalists, whether they're genuine journalists or not. Israel has faced again and again demands for Western journalists, independent journalists, to be allowed in. But pretty much every picture, and we've got images right now, every single image that comes out of Gaza has been approved by Hamas. It doesn't get out otherwise. No one's allowed to go and film. No one's allowed. It doesn't get out of the country. It's as simple as that. That's the footage we see. But a lot of those journalists we've seen, are blatantly open. You can see from their own postings on social media, they are supporters of Hamas. They celebrate, and not saying the case of these 5, but in some of the other cases we've seen in recent weeks, they have actually blatantly and openly supported what happened on October the 7th. Some of them are actually employed by Hamas or other jihadi groups within Gaza, and yet they're treated as if they're independent journalists when they're clearly not.
Yes, Julia, we had journalists who actually was holding hostages and was beating and abusing them on a daily basis. The hostages
An Al Jazeera
that were rescued from these apartments. Yes, these are the journalists, so-called journalists. We have journalists who were part of the massacre on October 7th. So we have to take this word journalist with a pinch of salt, but ultimately, Julia, whether they are or they're not, if it was a mistake, as your commentator said, Israel will own up to that mistake and try and change the way that it works so that these mistakes don't happen again, because we are a society with rules, with law and order. We're a democracy. When you're dealing essentially with a terrorist group that has no rules, that loves to sacrifice their own people because it looks good on camera, and ultimately they knew that these things would happen, and they were counting on these things to happen. And it's a very, very difficult war when we care more about the civilians than they do.
Yeah, and indeed, well, I mean, we right now, I'm just looking at the footage we're putting out, those who are watching on YouTube or on their connected devices, we're doing Hamas's propaganda work for them, because you've got people carrying children. No one wants to see slain or sickly children or starving children.
Nobody.
And you know as well as I do, again and again, pictures of children, horribly emaciated children particularly, put on the front pages of the newspapers, whether it's the New York Times or Sunday Express or the Daily Mirror last week. They are exposed as children who have actually have either been evacuated from the war, and that's, I've got his pictures for a long time, or they're children often with long-standing congenital illnesses and problems, which is why they look so emaciated. But this is Hamas propaganda. I mean, right now, what we're putting out right now on picture is Hamas propaganda.
Yes, because they're the only show in town, because they're the only ones controlling those images.
Shouldn't you let Western journalists in then?
Oh, I was going to come to that, absolutely. So people say, well, why doesn't Israel let journalists in? And I will say that if we do let journalists in, then those journalists are definitely going to be at risk. They could become also the casualties. And
Isn't that up to them?
Yes, but we don't need more human shields, Julia. We're dealing with so many already. Everybody seems to have forgotten. I'm sure you haven't. Do you remember when Alan Johnson from the BBC was taken hostage by Hamas and wasn't let out in 6 months? You know, he's been awfully quiet about that traumatic experience, but it seems like everybody's forgotten.
Very
the
interesting.
BBC journalist was taken hostage by Hamas, and nobody speaks about that. And yes, maybe Israel should let journalists in, but we knew that we couldn't prosecute the war the way we wanted to, because we don't want to put those journalists in harm's way.
All right, but Netanyahu said he would let people in. That's not just not happened yet. Whether that would change things on the ground, who knows? Fleur Hassan-Nahoum, Israeli Foreign Minister, Special Envoy, thank you very much.